Bienvenidos. Welcome to St. Paul University. My name is Joe Gunn. I work with the Centre Oblat, Voice for Justice, one of the three groups that is sponsoring today's event. We are very pleased to have you here. There are a couple of announcements that will begin before our formal welcome from Madame Chantal Beauvais, the rector of this university. But just let me begin by inviting everyone who has the famous one of these to turn them off, if you would be so kind, so that everybody around doesn't smile at you in that nice, kind, knowing way if your phone doesn't work. Second thing we'd ask you to do is on your chairs there is a machine that will allow you to hear the event, follow the event in French or English. Donc vous pouvez mettre le petit écouteur.
You can use channel 3 for French.
Si vous voulez écouter en anglais, c'est le canal 4. So you can listen in English to channel
4 in English.
You will need them. Some people think, oh, I can speak Spanish. Hasta la vista, baby. I know that. You know? The Cardinal will speak in his native tongue for about 30 minutes. So you may want to use your machine and set it up now, if you'd be so kind. So we'd like to thank Scott and Michael and Richard, who have set up all of this for us, and we will speak slowly so that everyone can hear the translation. This event is also being streamed online, so we welcome the many people that are watching from Peru to all across Canada. I want to begin just by saying that we could maybe just spend a few seconds being quiet in memory of someone who is a defender of the Amazon, Paulo Paulino Guajajara, who was killed last week, someone who was an Aboriginal leader of his people, the Guajajara people in Brazil, shot in the head by an illegal logger, people who laid in ambush to wait for him. And he's part of this group of people that was trying to defend their own territory. So if I wonder we wouldn't just bow our heads in memory of Paulo Paulino. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to present Madame Chantal Beauvais, Dr. Chantal Beauvais, the rector of the university.
Hello, how are you? Okay, you're ready? C'est bien, c'est bien. Alors bonjour aussi.
Hello to everyone listening online to the streaming. We're very glad to have you amongst us virtually, and also to those of you who are here in person at St. Paul University for this panel on the Synod on the Amazon.
To be able to welcome such a guest, but also panel of distinguished people on the panel, right at the close of the Synod on the Amazon. I think we're privileged witnesses, and it will be very interesting to hear what people have to say about the key insights of the Synod. Before we start, I'd like to thank the partners for the event. So Peace and Development is a partner, very important for the event, and also Le Centre Oblat, A Voice for Justice, and St. Paul University. So we all work together to make sure this event took place in a good way. And also I'd like to recognize some special guests. Of course, all of you are special. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention those special guests. So Nuncio Luigi Bonazzi, Monsignor Luigi Bonazzi is Apostolic Nuncio to Canada. Also His Excellency Mr. Ambassador Roberto Rodriguez, the Ambassador of Peru. And also Father Provincial Ken Thorson from the Lacombe province. Who is where? I saw him wave somewhere. Oh yeah, he's being very humble. He's like hiding in the back. And so we are fortunate, we are happy, we are honored, and we are also standing on a traditional land. And we learn from our Indigenous brothers and sisters that the land is like a mother, and that the land is welcoming us. The land is generous. The land is making space for everybody. And so we have something to learn from Mother Earth, and it is this welcoming style, this welcoming being. So let us honor our Indigenous ancestors who taught us about Mother Earth, and let us be citizens, children of Mother Earth. And without further ado, I will let Joe take over for the next phase. Thank you.
Merci, Chantal. A quick explanation of the agenda. We have a wonderful crowd here. We will hear from Cardinal Barreto in just a moment. He will speak for about 30 minutes. After that, we're going to have a pause cafe, a break. And you are able to go directly below us into the cafeteria for some refreshment. And also there's some videos from Development and Peace that will be shown there, okay? So after the break, we will come back up. We will hear from the panel and from Monsignor Barreto again. So we have about, around, I would say around 2:30 or a little bit before, we're likely to break, okay? There are washrooms downstairs, as well as where the cafeteria is, and some people can direct you down there. So allow me to introduce El Cardinal Pedro Barreto. He was ordained in Lima, Peru in 1971. He served as an educator and a theologian for quite a few years. It's a wonderful thing that this oblate-inspired university has a Jesuit here. Father Cardinal Barreto is a Jesuit, of course. He became a bishop. He was ordained bishop in 2001. He became Archbishop of Huancayo, Peru, in 2004. And in May of 2018, Pope Francis announced the appointment of Monsignor Barreto as Cardinal. So Cardinal Barreto has had a long history of service in the Church. He's been president of Peru's Episcopal Commission for Social Action more than once. He has demonstrated deep commitment in the defense of human rights of the most impoverished peoples and in the care of our common home. He's been president of the Department of Justice and Solidarity of the CELAM, which is the Latin American Council of Bishops for Latin America and all the Caribbean. And he served more than once on the executive of the Peruvian bishops as well. Not only that, he's been on the Pontifical Commission, that is to say the Commission in Rome for the Universal Church, the Commission for Justice and Peace, which is now called the Dicastery of Service of Integral Human Development. So he's played several of these roles in his own country and beyond. He also worked, and I hope he'll tell us about his work, as the vice president of something called REPAM, the Pan-Amazonian network of church groups that worked to prepare the synod that just took place in Rome in October. More than 80,000 people in preparation for the synod in conversations, and Monsignor was not only chair of the group that organized all of that, but he is also one of the co-presidents of the synod that took place for 3 weeks there in Rome. Now, the most important thing, perhaps, this morning, Cardinal Barreto was granted an honorary doctorate from this university, which is a mark of exceptional recognition, the highest honor that St. Paul University grants to a person whose influence is considered remarkable and exemplary. So would you please join me in welcoming Cardinal Barreto.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you today. Thank you to Dr. Chantal, the rector of this very esteemed University of St. Paul. And I would also like to thank the Oblates of Mary Immaculate who direct and accompany this educational process here at this university, a university that is pontifical, in fact. That is to say, it has a very close relationship with the pontiff himself, Pope Francis, who is a bridge between science and faith, which complement each other. I would like to speak today of the ecclesial experience of the Amazonian Synod. This synod that was a deep experience from an ecclesial, spiritual, and pastoral point of view. First of all, what is a synod? Many of you know, but it's always good to remind ourselves. A synod is an opportunity to walk together. It's not being static. It's walking together. If we're in a river, then we are navigating together on a common boat, and all under a common vision, that is the vision of Jesus Christ and his vicariate, the Bishop of Rome, our Pope, walking together for three things: to listen, to discern, and to act. Listen, as Pope Francis tells us, listen to the cries of the earth. St. Paul says that the earth is spasming, is yearning also to provide light, the light of Christ, to the people. St. Paul is an example of discernment. He speaks of the fruits of the Holy Spirit: peace, joy, justice, solidarity, brotherhood and sisterhood, and the fruits of the unholy spirit, of the demon, which is individualism, selfishness, the desire to dominate and own. And so St. Paul is very relevant to us today. But to listen, to discern, and to act together as a church, as a community, as a family, as a human family, from the always new perspective and renewed perspective of Christ, guided by the love of the Father and with the strength of the Holy Spirit. This fundamental experience makes us aware of the fact that the mission, the fundamental mission of the Church, is to evangelize. There is an exhortation, an apostolic exhortation of Paul VI, Evangelii Nuntiandi, which affirms for us that joy, the comforter, the comforting that we receive from the Spirit to announce Jesus. And that is the purpose of a synod, to announce, to share the perennial light of Christ, a Jesus who in Pope Francis's Evangelii Gaudium, where the Pope says, the joy of the gospel fills the heart and the life of the encounter with Jesus. in this encounter with Jesus is born and reborn this joy. A joy that no one or nothing can take away from us. An indigenous person from the Amazon who participated in the synod, in one of the sessions, or actually in one of the press conferences, said the following. It's not an exact quote, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is the idea that he shared at the press conference. You journalists are talking about things that we don't understand, vidi probati, the making women deacons. We don't understand why these are debates or why they're controversial, because it's Jesus who has brought us together through Pope Francis to reflect and to listen to each other and to discern and to act as a church. This is the example and the testimony, the witnessing that we can affirm as a great richness of this recently held synod, the centrality of Jesus. Without Jesus, we are nothing. He said it himself, I am the plant and you are the branches. I am the tree, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. And doing nothing means to lose time, to waste time, no matter what efforts we may exert. In second place, it's not just to announce, but also to denounce those who oppose themselves to the presence of the reign of God. And the presence of the reign of God is justice. So we need to denounce injustice. The reign of God is peace. And therefore we need to denounce any conflict, any warmongering, any lack of respect to the dignity of the human person. The reign of God is intercultural. It is throughout the world. Go throughout the world and announce my gospel. And so a conflict or a lack of respect between cultures is also something we need to denounce. And as St. Francis of Assisi said in one of his testimonies that was shared widely, it was something he said to one of his Franciscan brothers. Testimony is something that convinces, and it's the acts that convince, not the words that one speaks. So denouncing then everything that represents the non-presence of the reign of God in our world today, and this accompanying our brothers and sisters who help us to discover this presence of the reign of God. They are the seeds of the reign of God, the seeds of the Word of God. And in this case, I'm referring to the indigenous communities of the Amazon region, which really embody this spirit of being the seed of the Word of God and the reign of God. I've been very impressed and impacted to learn that in Canada there are many indigenous communities, and we have much to learn from Canadian indigenous people and to accompany them and for them to accompany us. And lastly, we need to convert ourselves, a conversion that is truly pastoral. The Pope, our Pope Francis, insisted a lot during the synod, throughout the synod, that we had gathered together to convert each other, to convert ourselves and each other. And this had to be a pastoral conversion, that is looking at Jesus as the good pastor who wants to bring together, not to create, not to sow division, who cares and doesn't mistreat. A Jesus who is always walking the path, not a shepherd who sits and just stares at his sheep. No, who walks with them, who accompanies them, who cares for them, and sometimes goes ahead of them to show them the way, and sometimes walks in the middle of the pack to strengthen them, and sometimes is at the back to take care of those sheep and those lambs who have been lost, who have lost their way, or who are going more slowly. This is what is at the heart of evangelization, and this pastoral conversion also demands of us a respect, maximum respect for culture, for different cultures, those who are invisible or made invisible for human beings, for Western culture, the technocratic Western culture and way of doing things. The Amazonian Synod has rendered visible these brothers and sisters who live in the Amazon region, who were born there, who their ancestors cared for and enriched this incredible biosphere that is the Amazon. 7.5 square kilometers, 34 million brothers and sisters who live in the Amazon region, 3 million brothers and sisters who are indigenous, with 390 different communities, indigenous communities, with more than 240 languages. It's like a mirror of what happens in the rest of the world, of the diversity of our humanity. And this biosphere, this biome, is threatened, and has been threatened, in fact, for many centuries, by those who have arrived not to encounter these cultures peacefully, but to pursue wealth through natural resources, leaving behind them deep impacts on people and on the environment, our Mother Earth, as Francisco and also St. Francis of Assisi calls it, our sister, our Mother Earth. A conversion that has to be ecological. So pastoral conversion, it means not only conversion to respect for different cultures and the diversity of cultures and interculturality, and particularly for indigenous peoples, but also an ecological conversion. Pope Francis, speaking to indigenous peoples last year in January when he visited Peru, he wanted to begin the preparation for this Pan-Amazonian Synod in Puerto Maldonado, and he said to indigenous communities there, you are the guardians, you are the custodians of creation. From you we have so much to learn in this university of life that will allow us to then care for creation and life from your point of view, from your perspective, and therefore to care for our earth, for our water, for the air. And finally, Pope Francis has pointed out to us the importance of a synodal conversion. So this synod did not end with a document. There will be a document, but more importantly, the accompaniment, the ongoing walking together, thinking of those indigenous communities that are great teachers for us because of their care for the earth, the care for our common home. I'm very glad to be here with all of you because I have seen a deep commitment here, particularly from this pontifical university, St. Paul University, this care for and this accompaniment of indigenous communities. And I think this is a sign of what we can do together, both the university and parish communities and all of the church, with other institutions, including non-Christian institutions, other religious and faith groups, to seek the common good and to care for our common home. I would like now, in a more substantial way, explain to you what is behind this Amazonian Synod that ended on the 27th of October, just a few weeks ago. At the root of this ecclesial experience that was the special synod on the Amazon region are two documents of the Pontifical Magisterium, one that is programmatic in nature and comes from the pontificate of Pope Francis, the Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, which is addressed to all baptized in the Catholic Church. And this exhortation, Pope Francis offered it in November of 2013. Very few months after he had in fact become Pope, the first Latin American Pope of our church. Of course, this great responsibility of being the pastor of our universal church as the Bishop of Rome. And he says in Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel fills the heart and all of the life of those who encounter Jesus. Those who allow themselves to be saved by him are freed from sin, from sadness, from interior emptiness, and from isolation. With Jesus Christ, joy is born and is reborn. And in this exhortation, says Pope Francis, I want to address myself to faithful Christians, to invite them to a new stage of evangelization characterized by this joy, and to indicate pathways for the church to walk forward on in the coming years. This affirmation, this programmatic affirmation, we are living it out. He's inviting us, the Pope is inviting us to enter into a new chapter, a new stage, walking together. And this new chapter needs to be characterized by the joy of the gospel, the joy given to us by Jesus. In another place, he talks about the joy that we don't find in a technocratic society. It can provide comforts and a certain standard of living, but it doesn't bring joy to our hearts. And the other document that's part of the social doctrine of the Church is the encyclical Laudato Si on the care for our common home. In the first number of this encyclical, it says, Laudato Si mi Signore, that is, praise to you, my Lord. Sang St. Francis of Assisi. In this beautiful canticle, he reminded us that our common house is also our sister, like our sister with whom we share our existence, and like a beautiful mother who welcomes us into her arms. Praise be to you, my Lord, for this sister, our Mother Earth, who sustains us and governs and produces all the diversity of fruits and colorful flowers and grasses. The ecological challenges that we are faced with today and that humanity must deal with today, as we know, are climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the lack of water, with the exception of Canada, which it seems to me has a lot of water and is very blessed and very fortunate. You may be the last, in fact, to experience this shortness, but we are experiencing it in many other parts of the earth. Of course, waste and waste management. The Pope says that we are turning the earth into a giant waste bin. The oceans are full of plastic, and we even speak of now of islands that are covered with plastic. There's a whole other continent now in the ocean of plastic. And the consequences of this are very serious for the biodiversity of the oceans, the fish life, and other flora and fauna in the oceans. Deforestation in the case of the Amazon, that is almost reached 20% of the total area of the Amazon. And if we consider that this biosphere is one of the lungs of the earth, we are attacking the entire body, the entire earth, when we attack its lung. So these challenges, these ecological challenges that we face, speak to us of a degradation of all of our humanity, and we cannot adequately face this ecological degradation if we don't pay attention to the causes that are directly related to this degradation, which are human and social. A lack of an ethical compass, which is a real problem for humanity today, the lack of principles and values. And faced with this current situation, why then is this encyclical posing this question? And the encyclical itself answers the question. The deterioration of the environment and of humanity particularly affects the most marginalized, the most impoverished, the most fragile on our planet, those who we think of as disposable. And we can say that Indigenous communities are often lumped into that group, those we consider as people who don't count, that we have nothing to learn from them. However, the Pope says, to help us to understand the grave crisis that we are living through now, he says there are not two separate crises, one ecological in nature and one social in nature. There is one complex, intertwined social and ecological crisis going on. Speaking now more specifically about the Synod, it is definitely a process, a dynamic, a movement, one that pushes us from the point of view of the gospel, particularly for those of us who are members of the Catholic Church. And this breath, this pushing forward, says Pope Francis, is one of listening and common action, collective accompaniment. He says, Pope Francis affirmed in 2015, when we were celebrating the 50 years of the motu proprio apostolica solicitudo, he says the path of synodality is the path that God expects and hopes for from the Church in the third millennium. And starting with the previous synod of young people and leading up to this more recent synod, bishops, indigenous people, members of religious communities, priests and others, 175 in all, 40 minutes each they had. The Pope listened. He was present for all of these presentations, and every 4 presentations, that each one lasting 4 minutes, we would have 4 minutes to listen to God. To listen to God. In prayer, in silent prayer. This was a big difference, and is a big difference between what goes on in a Congress or a parliament or a legislative assembly, where there are ideologies and different parties, different political parties. It's a very big difference in terms of the process. It's not a synod is not a parliament. It is a synodal experience of listening to the other and listening to God. listening to God. This path of synodality is not something that Pope Francis invented. Paul VI instituted synods. The early church, though, the church that was faithful to Jesus in the beginning, practiced synodality. It did. They walking together, listening together to each other, discerning together, acting together. From the diversity of cultures and individual experiences and community experiences. So we must think together, reflect together, feel together, and act together in consequence. I would say that the motivations that from the Christian experience invite us to take seriously and with great responsibility the urgency of responding to the ecological crisis come from the following aspects that I think are very important, and I think it's very important to outline them here on this platform and here at this St. Paul University. First of all, science is showing us, is indicating to us that our common home is sick and very severely sick. What is happening to our home? This is what Pope Francis asks us in chapter 1 of Laudato Si. What is happening in our home? Science is not wrong. 2 + 2 = 4 in any part of the world. Even though some, because of corruption, will say that 2 + 2 = 6. But science is telling us that our earth is sick, is gravely ill, and we all have to place ourselves in an attitude of awareness, of consciousness, leaving aside our indifference and our apathy. To science, Pope Francis assigns 3 letters, C-O-N, consciencia, conscience, conscience, conscience. Science is important, but conscience, conscience, means together. I am with. I have conscience. I have awareness. I am awake. I am not indifferent and apathetic. We must wake up this consciousness, this sleeping consciousness of our own faith. Sometimes we say, I'm a believer, I believe in Jesus, I'm a Catholic, but we're not conscious. We don't say that or feel that consciously. And consciousness comes fundamentally from an ethical standpoint, from ethics, from principles, from values. We as a Catholic Church are not going to solve all the problems of today's world. We are not called to that even. But there are Catholics, there are professionals, there are very well-resourced universities who can contribute to the transformation of our society. And that, I think, is what this university is trying to do. Therefore, the contemplation of Jesus makes us become aware to adopt a consciousness of these ethics that come from the gospel. And we have this in the 2nd chapter of Laudato Si, where Pope Francis speaks to us of the gospel of creation. But let's take another step. Let's go even further. There are human causes that are provoking, that are causing this deep social and ecological crisis. It's like in the human body. We have a normal body temperature. But if our temperature goes up, then we get worried and we go to the doctor. And if it goes up even more, we go very quickly to see a specialist, because we can't have a high temperature, a high fever for a long time. The human body can't survive that, and that's what's happening to our body, that is the earth, our common home. We can imagine a mother or a father. Their child is maybe 38 or has 38 or 39 or 40 even temperature. What would we call a parent who said, "Oh, we'll just ignore it. It'll pass"? When there's a problem in our common home and we cross our arms and say, "We can't do anything about it." This is very well explained by Pope Francis in chapter 3 of Laudato Si, when he talks about the human root of the ecological crisis. There are damages that come from nature. An earthquake, for example, causes damage. But climate change is fundamentally being caused by human beings and is the responsibility of human beings. And then the proposal that the Pope makes to both believers and non-believers, to all on this earth, is in chapter 4 of Laudato Si, where he speaks of integral ecology. This integral ecology means that everything is connected. In our body, everything's connected. And this is what the Catholic Church, this is how the Catholic Church is responding to the current crisis. This is how the Pope is asking the Catholic Church to respond to the current crisis, with an integral ecology. Pope Francis also says that dialogue between all of the social actors and stakeholders is the only instrument to find together the solutions, the immediate and urgent solutions to solve or lessen this social and ecological crisis. In the 5th chapter, he talks about several guidelines or orientations for education guidelines for action. And I'll finish here on the encyclical. This is very important for education. It's necessary to have education, to educate ourselves on the care of our common home and those who live in our common home. That is the poorest, the indigenous people, the most marginalized. And that's the 6th chapter, where the Pope speaks in the encyclical of education, of ecological education and spirituality. A proposal then that is difficult and challenging that the Pope is making and is suggesting to us, and that is that we look to indigenous communities. They live in a sober manner. I've had much contact with indigenous communities in the Amazon. They fish only what they need for that day. They harvest only what they need to live. They live day to day. They don't think about what's to come in a week or in a month. The current lifestyle that most of us live needs to change. Cardinal Ulrich, who participated in this synod, he is the Archbishop of Luxembourg, said something very important that really touched many of us, both in our minds and in our hearts. He said, if we want to live as people live in Luxembourg, we would need 5 planets, five Earths. 5 Earths, if we want to live the way Luxembourgers live, with that kind of a consumer mentality in this technocratic society. The Pope says that we need an alliance between humanity and the environment. And what does this mean? This means a conversion, a pastoral conversion, a cultural conversion and an ecological conversion towards a synodal attitude where we live in joy and peace. God, the Trinity, and the relationship between all of us who are creatures of God, and the testimony and model of St. Francis of Assisi, with the strength of this announcing and denouncing and the accompaniment of Jesus within all of us, allows us to live with great hope as we look to the future. I would like to thank you for your attention, for your commitment to this struggle. We will continue to work together and with Indigenous communities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monsignor.
We're going to have a little break now. I would suggest that this allows you to do a couple of things. You may care to stay in this room and have a conversation with friends. For those that would like to move from your chairs, we'd ask you to leave les écouteurs, the little machines on your chair there, and don't wrap up the cord. That can do them some harm. So you can please leave it there, but you can feel free to move around and about if you wish. And you can proceed right down the stairs into the cafeteria if you'd like a drink of something, want to watch a video, or chat with people there. We are going to be back here in this room at 2:50. And I'd ask you to show a little discipline around that because really what we'd like is there are some people that are watching online from across Canada and around the world actually. And so we'd like to allow them to also know that we're beginning again at a little bit after 2:50. So thank you very much, and please enjoy a conversation with people around you.